The first time I heard a dead man whisper, I was standing alone in a locked room, holding a clipboard and a scalpel. And the body was zipped up. You ever work somewhere so quiet, your own heartbeat feels intrusive? That's what the morgue is like. No footsteps, no chatter, just the low hum of refrigeration units, and the occasional ticking from the wall clock. It's a kind of silence that eats sound, where the air feels too still, like it's holding its breath with you. I work the graveyard shift at County Morgue. It's not glamorous. It's not interesting, not like the shows make it seem. 90% of the time, I'm just logging reports, confirming ID tags, moving bodies in and out of cold storage. Sometimes I help prep for autopsies. Mostly I'm alone. Completely alone. No security. No other staff. Just me and the dead, from midnight to 6 a.m. I didn't start here. I used to work in private forensics, clean labs, high-end facilities, even catered lunches. But I blew that chance. Took a shortcut I shouldn't have. Got sloppy, got caught. No one got hurt, but my name lost its shine. No firm wanted a tech with a black mark. County was the only one that didn't care. They don't pay much. But at least the corpses don't complain. That night, the night, started like any other. I parked in the rear lot, buzzed myself in, and went through the same routine I always do: check the intake log, verify chamber temps, make coffee, pretend to read while half watching old horror flicks on mute. The building was silent. Always is after midnight. Sometimes the motion sensor lights flicker on in the hallway, but that's just the air shifting. There were 3 bodies that night. One known, Evelyn Hartley, 68, found unresponsive in her bathtub by a neighbor who hadn't seen her in days. The other 2 were trickier. No IDs, no witnesses. They were pulled from the wreckage of a cargo van that slammed into a support column under the I-84 overpass. No seatbelts. Massive trauma. Burn patterns on the clothing. The driver's wallet had melted into his jacket. All we had were charred remains and shattered faces. They were listed as John Doe number 24 and John Doe number 25. Their remains were stored together in Cold Chamber 3, a double-wide unit used for multi-victim recoveries. Not ideal, but space was tight and the me had already finished the preliminary. Around 2:15 a.m., I started to get that pressure in my skull. The kind that tells you sleep deprivation is catching up. I was microwaving old noodles in the break room when the intercom popped, just a static buzz, brief, sharp. Then silence. Now look, I've worked in this building almost a year. I know the quirks. Sometimes you get interference from the old ambulance radios they still use upstairs in EMS. But that static wasn't from the ceiling feed. It came from inside the building. From my floor. I walked back to the main hallway, thinking maybe a janitor wandered in early, or an officer came by to grab case files. But the corridor was dark. All lights motion-triggered. And none had turned on but mine. Weird, but not enough to freak out. Not yet. I made a note to check the camera logs later, grabbed my clipboard, and started the body count. Chambers 1 and 2? Normal. Evelyn was tagged, logged, and quiet. Then I opened Chamber 3. The smell hit first. Not unusual. The charred ones always carry something extra, a tang of cooked rubber and blood. But then I noticed something strange. One of the John Does had been moved. He'd been zipped in a white body bag hours ago. I knew that because I had zipped him myself. But now the bag was halfway undone, like someone had started to open it, then stopped. I stepped closer. The zipper was pointed upward, toward his face. And there, in the narrow strip of exposed skin, was the faint impression of a fingerprint. Not on him. In him. Right over his throat, as if someone had pressed hard. As if he'd been grabbed. But no one else had come in. No one living. I stood up too fast. The chair rolled back into the wall, clattered. My heart was punching now, not from what I'd heard, but from what I hadn't. I knew this place. Every clank, hum, and distant rattle. You learn those things when you're alone with the dead long enough. That wasn't a pipe. wasn't the HVAC. It was a single, deliberate thud, like a boot hitting tile. And it came from the corridor. Clipboard still in hand, I stepped into the hallway. The light sensors clicked on overhead, flickering patches of white along the long stretch of concrete. Empty. I walked toward cold chamber 3. I wasn't scared yet. But my mouth had gone dry, and I found myself breathing through my nose, trying not to make noise. Something instinctive. Animal. When I got to the chamber, the air felt heavier. Still cold, but close, like something had just passed through. I unlocked the latch and slid the door open. The John Doe was unzipped again. Lower this time. The bag was halfway down his torso, and his left arm had slipped out, just enough to rest, palm up, on the steel tray. It looked posed. Not flopped. Not jostled loose. Placed. That arm had been secured hours ago. I'd zipped it myself. I stared at it, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd misremembered. Maybe the vibrations of the cooling system had shifted things. Maybe the bag hadn't been zipped all the way. But no, I'm careful. Especially with burn victims. Especially when I'm the only tech on site. And that's when the panic landed. Quiet but deep, like a weight behind my ribs. I closed the chamber gently and stepped back. Then I grabbed my phone and called Dr. Ellison, the lead me. She was probably home, asleep. She picked up on the 4th ring. Groggy. Ellison. It's me, I said. I think we've got an issue. What kind of issue? One of the crash victims. His body bag's been opened. Twice. I zipped it. I logged it. There's a fingerprint bruise on his throat now that wasn't there earlier. I think. You think what? I didn't know what I thought. Something's not right. A pause. Then, stay put. I'll be there in 40. I hung up and paced the hallway. Didn't sit. Didn't look at the cameras again. I didn't want to take my eyes off the corridor. At 2:47 a.m., something scraped the tile behind me. I turned fast. A gurney. It had rolled 6 inches out from the wall, angled slightly, like someone had bumped it while walking past. I hadn't heard footsteps. No gust of air. Just that drag, metal against concrete. I approached slowly. Checked the wheels. One was still spinning. I crouched, reached out, and stopped it with my hand. Then I stood, hard hammering now. Someone had moved it. Or was still moving. I backed away, returned to the front office, and locked the door behind me. 40 minutes, I told myself. Just make it 40 minutes. At 3:11 a.m., the power cut. Everything went black. No lights. No hum. Just silence. And then, a knock. One soft knock. Right outside the office door. It's hard to explain how fast your brain shuts down when a dead man blinks. Especially when you're the one who certified him. We're trained not to overreact. In this job, panic doesn't help anyone, not the cops, not the families, and certainly not the body on the table. So when I felt that twitch beneath the eyelid, I didn't scream. Didn't stumble back. I just stood there, blinking at him, hoping I'd imagined it. But it happened again. A flutter. Barely perceptible. The kind of thing you could blame on a nerve, on post-mortem settling. But I'd already done the checks. No pulse. No respiration. Fixed pupils. Core temp cold. All of it lined up. Except now, his right eye was half open. Let me back up. That morning, I'd been called to do a pickup from St. Vincent's, a mid-30s male, cardiac arrest, DOA at the scene. His name was Mark Collins. Lived alone. Found by a neighbor who hadn't seen him walking his dog in 2 days. EMS pronounced him, tagged him, and left the body in the hallway for transport. I arrived with the van around 8:40 a.m., wheeled him out, and logged the time of receipt, 8:53. At the county facility, I went through the usual intake process, photograph, log personal effects, assign tow tag, then moved to preliminary assessment. The full autopsy was scheduled for the next day. My job was to handle documentation and verify condition. Basic stuff. But when I started the external, I noticed something strange. There were abrasions on his wrists, not huge, but clean and recent. As if something had rubbed the skin raw. Not from a fall, and too uniform to be accidental. Almost like restraints. Then I checked his fingernails. Dirt. Not unusual, except it was fresh. Like he'd been clawing at something. I noted it, moved on. Maybe he'd collapsed in his yard. Maybe the neighbor left that out. It happens. But then came the eyelid. It moved. I leaned in, heart thudding. Maybe it was dehydration. Some kind of muscular reaction. But now his eye was half-lidded, staring at the overhead light. I reached for the monitor. I told myself it was impossible, but I did it anyway. Grabbed the portable pulse oximeter from the cabinet and clipped it to his index finger. Nothing. Then one blip. It vanished. No repeat. Just a flicker on the screen. A phantom pulse. I unclipped it, breath shallow, and stood back. Mark Collins had no hospital records. No history of heart disease. Nothing in the tox report. He was supposedly clean, dead, and cold. So how the hell had his body twitched under my fingers? I moved to check his vitals again, just in case. I didn't expect anything. But this time, I felt something. Heat. Not a fever. Not full body warmth. Just his neck, specifically under his jaw. A patch of skin that felt warmer than it should have. And that's when his lips parted. Not a breath. No gasp. Just movement. Like the beginning of a word. I stumbled back, hit the tray behind me. Metal clattered to the floor. The body didn't sit up. Didn't move again. But his lips stayed open. Not slack. Open. And it hit me. What if he wasn't dead when they tagged him? What if he'd been in a state so shallow, so close to death, they wrote him off too fast? And what if he'd woken up, in the bag? I should have called the coroner. Should have phoned it in, locked the room down, followed protocol. Instead, I froze. Mark Collins, dead on arrival, tagged, zipped, logged, was lying on my table with parted lips, a warm patch under his jaw, and a faint bruise ring around both wrists. If he had woken up in the body bag. I didn't want to finish that sentence. I took a slow breath and stepped closer. His eye was still open. Just one. Dried at the edges. Pupil fixed. No signs of breathing. No chest movement. But the body wasn't stiff. Not fully. The rigor hadn't set in like it should have by now. I pulled a fresh oximeter from the drawer, new battery, clean read. Clipped it to his other hand. Nothing. Flat line. Then blip. A second later, another. Pulse rate, 34 BPM. I stared at the screen, heart thudding loud enough to drown it out. He was alive. Alive. I turned back to the body just in time to see his fingers twitch. Not spasm. Flex. Like a slow, clumsy attempt to move. "Oh my God!" I whispered. My hands started to shake. This wasn't an error in paperwork. This was a botched pronouncement. Someone screwed up, and Mark Collins had been zipped into a vinyl sack while still alive. I grabbed my phone and dialed the emergency extension upstairs for the medical examiner on call. As it rang, I leaned over the body. "Mark," I said, barely above a whisper. "If you can hear me, blink." No response. The line clicked. A voice answered. "Dr. Hanford. This is Kelsey and Morgue Intake. Hi, this is going to sound insane, but I think I have a live body here. Mark Collins. Pronounced DOA at St. Vincent's. But he's got vitals." Silence. Then Hanford said, "Are you sure?" I looked down. His fingers moved again. Slight, slow, like someone pulling against underwater ropes. "Yes. He's got a faint pulse. He might be conscious. But something's wrong. I think he might have been restrained. Before death." Another pause. Then, "Call 911. Get him transferred back to the ER. I'll alert them. And don't touch anything else on his body. If it's criminal, we need chain of custody. I hung up and reached for the gurney lock. My hands were soaked with sweat. I went to lower the table guardrails, and that's when his other eye opened. Fully this time. Bloodshot. Dull. But tracking. He looked at me. No confusion. No fear. Just hatred. The kind of look that makes your skin crawl. That makes your instincts scream that something about this is wrong, even if everything else says you're doing the right thing. Then his hand snapped upward, grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak, but it was enough to make me yelp. I'm going to help you, I said quickly. You're safe now. You're at the morgue. But you're not. His mouth opened. His voice came out in a strained whisper, so cracked it barely sounded human. No morgue, he rasped. Basement. I froze. What? He stared at me, eyes now wide, desperate. His nails dug into my arm. They put me down there. Before. Drugged me. Woke up in the dark. Woke up when they... He trailed off. The monitor still read 34 BPM. But he was crashing. Fast. I reached for the phone. Dialed 911. As I waited for the call to connect, I heard his last words. They do it, every month. I looked down. His lips stopped moving. His eyes glassed over. The pulse reading dropped off the monitor. Mark Collins died. Again. This time, for real. You'd be surprised how fast a guy will admit to murder if you lock him in a refrigerated drawer and turn out the lights. I'm not a detective. Not a cop. I don't carry a badge, and I don't carry a gun. What I carry is a clipboard, nitro gloves, and a set of keys that open every cold chamber in the city morgue. But a few months ago, I learned that when the system fails, when the case goes cold and the evidence disappears, there's still one place the truth can surface. Down here, with the dead. It started with a John Doe. Thin. Mid-40s. Found stabbed behind a grocery store off 43rd Street, body dumped by the dumpsters like yesterday's meat. The paperwork said, transient. The photos said something different. Clean hands. Trimmed nails. No sun damage on the skin. Not homeless. Not for long. The stab wounds were tight and consistent, 5 of them, all in the chest. Clean entry, minimal hesitation. The killer knew what they were doing. I didn't usually get involved in the autopsies, but that day, the ME asked me to assist. Low staff, high case load. So I gloved up and helped document, while she did the internal. One thing stood out immediately. The guy's shirt had blood on the inside. Not pulled, not soaked, spattered. Like something hit him from close range while he was already bent forward. That didn't make sense. Not unless he'd already been bleeding before the stab wounds. Or unless he wasn't the only one bleeding. We finished up, logged everything, and placed him in cold storage. I tagged him John Doe number 31. The next morning, I got a call from a cop named Kershaw. He wasn't assigned to the case, but he said he had a guy in custody who might match our body. Said the guy had turned himself in, walked into the precinct at 3 a.m. with blood on his shoes and asked, "Did he make it?" The man's name was Anthony Leeds. 38. Bar back. No record, no known connections to the victim. I agreed to meet them both at the morgue. It's not unusual. Sometimes ID happens this way. We have protocols. Escorts. Controlled access. Kershaw arrived with Leeds cuffed and quiet. He looked smaller than I expected. Pale. Twitchy. Didn't say a word until we were inside. "Where is he?" he asked. "I want to see him." "You sure?" Kershaw asked. Leeds nodded. I brought them to chamber 7. Slid the tray out halfway. Leeds stared at the body for a long time. His hands trembled slightly in the cuffs. Then he smiled. "Not him," he said. My stomach dropped. "What?" He turned to Kershaw. "That's not the guy I stabbed." Kershaw looked at me. You sure this is doe number 31? Positive, I said. I tagged him myself. Leeds shook his head slowly. I stabbed a guy last night. 5 times. Behind Market Depot. But that's not the one. And that's when it hit me. If he was telling the truth, we were looking at 2 stabbings. Same method. Same location. And one of the bodies hadn't been found yet. We called dispatch immediately. Kershaw put in a priority search request for the alley behind Market Depot. I stayed behind with Leeds while he stepped into the hall to coordinate. And that's when Leeds turned to me and said, "You ever felt someone's ribs crack under your hand?" I didn't answer. He chuckled. "It's not what you expect. It's like wet wood. Soft. Makes your arm tingle." I stood by the chamber, trying not to look at him. Not give him the satisfaction. "I want to see where you keep them," he said next. "The ones no one claims." I frowned. "Why?" Leeds shrugged, lips curled in that half-smile. "Just curious. You work with the forgotten, right? People nobody misses." My gut twisted. I'd seen guys like him before, ones who confuse confession with control. Who bleed just enough truth to keep you leaning in, then twist it when you do. "I'll wait with you in the lobby," I said flatly. But he just looked past me, toward the chamber drawer. "Not him," he said again. "But close. That one screamed more." I should have left. But I didn't. Something about the way he was talking, the way he was testing his words like probes in soft flesh, it pulled me in. "I've seen the photos," I said. "The wounds. You knew where to stab." He didn't flinch. "I practice." My mouth went dry. He smiled wider. "On pigs. At first. I worked in a meat plant when I was 19. You'd be surprised how fast the body gives up when you know where to stick the knife." I heard Kershaw's voice approaching, muffled by the wall. I turned toward the door, and Leeds took a step closer. "You ever wonder how many get missed down here?" he asked. "Guys like me. The ones who don't get flagged. Who know when to stop bleeding and when to keep going." I stared at him. "You turned yourself in." "Only because I wanted to see if I was good enough," he whispered. "To see if I made it. But I didn't, did I?" "No," I said. "You didn't." Kershaw walked back in. "They found another body," he said. "Same alley. Hidden under cardboard. Matching wounds. Looks like your guy." Leeds closed his eyes like he was savoring a bite of something expensive. "Good," he said. "I hate unfinished work." They escorted him out, cuffed and smirking. I watched him go and felt the temperature in the room drop, like the cold storage itself was reacting to what he'd said. Later that night, long after the report was filed and the new victim brought in, I found myself alone in the back hall, the hallway that leads to chambers 9 through 12. The overflow section. The unclaimed. I don't scare easy. But that night, every shadow felt like it was stretching too long. Every light buzzed just a little too loud. I checked the chamber locks. All secure. Except one. Chamber 11. The latch was half open. That's not something you miss. Not in this job. I stared at it for a long time before reaching out. The drawer was empty. It was supposed to be holding a body from last week, another John Doe. Man in his 50s. Overdose. Or that's what we thought. I checked the log. No transfer. No release. And then I remembered something Leeds had said, something he'd whispered just before leaving. "You ever wonder how many get missed? There's a window in our morgue that looks into the viewing room, but last Friday night, the lights were off, no one was scheduled, and someone was staring back at me. Most nights are the same. Quiet. Repetitive. Time slows down when you're alone with the dead. I'm a forensic photographer, which means I document bodies. Injuries, IDs, wounds, tattoos, clothing, positioning, everything. My workspace is a long, clean lab across from the viewing room, separated by a two-way glass window. Families come in sometimes to ID loved ones. I can see them through the glass, but they can't see me. Except Friday night, it was the other way around. My shift started at 6 and ran till 2. I was working solo, usual rotation. The other tech called out last minute, and we didn't have backup. Still, it wasn't supposed to be a busy night. One body scheduled for photography, a man in his 60s, DOA from a construction site fall. No suspicious circumstances. By 10 p.m., I had processed him. Photographed the injuries. Logged his tattoos. He had a faded snake coiled around a cross on his chest, one of those old prison jobs. I made a note. Nothing unusual. I was cleaning up, organizing lenses, formatting cards, when I saw movement in the viewing room window. At first, I thought it was a reflection. My own motion. But then it moved again. I froze. The lights were off on that side of the glass, but there was someone there, a figure, standing motionless in the dark. I could just make out the faint curve of a shoulder, a shape behind the glass. But no viewing was scheduled. No families. No police. I walked slowly to the window, leaned in. Whoever it was didn't flinch. I backed away and turned on the hallway feed. We have a camera in the corridor that leads into the viewing room. It should have shown movement. The hallway was empty. I called down to security. Asked if anyone had buzzed in. They checked the log. Nothing. I asked them to send someone up. While I waited, I turned back to the glass. The figure was gone. I stood there for a long time, watching my own breath fog on the glass. Then I noticed the smudge. On the inside of the viewing room window, right at head height, there was a mark. Greasy. Smudged. A nose print. Someone had leaned in, face to the glass. Watching me. Security arrived 10 minutes later. I let them in. Together we searched the viewing room. Empty. Clean. But the smudge was still there. I asked them to pull badge data, hallway footage, anything. No one had entered. They told me maybe it was a trick of the light. Or an old print. Maybe it had been there before. But it hadn't. I see that glass every day. I would have noticed. They left. Said to report it if anything else strange happened. And I almost let it go. Until I'd pulled up the raw image files of the man I'd photographed. There, in the background of the full-body shot, just barely in frame, was the reflection of the glass window. And in it a shape. A silhouette. Too tall to be mine. Too far from the lens. Someone else had been standing behind me, the entire time I stared at that image for a long time. There was no mistaking it, just over my shoulder, in the reflection of the viewing room glass, was a tall figure. Vague, distorted, but clearly not me. I'd been crouching during the shot, framing the man's leg injury. This person was upright. Still. Watching. I zoomed in, but the angle gave me almost nothing. Just a blur of shape. No face. No color. But it wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't me. And that meant someone had been standing behind the glass during the photography session. Unlogged. Unseen. Unaccounted for. I locked the photography room, turned off the lights, and walked, fast, to the security office. I need to see the hallway feed again, I told them. From 10 to 10:20. No skips. No gaps. Real time. The guard, a guy named Merritt, didn't argue. He pulled the footage. I stood behind him as we watched. The hallway was empty. Motion sensors triggered lights a few times, but no bodies. No movement. Just the dull hum of stillness. Except at 10:07. The camera blinked. One frame. Less than a second. When it came back, the light outside the viewing room was still on, but now the motion sensor light was off. Like someone had moved, and then stopped. Merritt rewound it 5 times. Slowed it down. That frame was just gone. A glitch. Maybe. But I've seen glitches. And this wasn't one. Is there another entrance? I asked. He shook his head. That room has one door. Keycard access. Nothing triggered. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Merritt leaned back in his chair and said, "You want to know something weird? A couple months ago, another guy, Tom, second shift, he said he swore someone was watching him through that glass one night." "Same room?" "Yep. Thought it was a family member who got stuck after hours. He went in to check, nothing. Place was empty. I didn't sleep well that night. I came in the next day during daylight. Pulled the incident report from that older viewing room event. Nothing came of it. No missing persons, no forced entries. But one line stood out in the log. Smudge found on glass. Height 6 feet 3 inches. Unknown source. Room locked. Same as mine." That afternoon, I got a message from Dr. Saito, the attending pathologist. He'd reviewed the autopsy on the man I photographed, the one from the construction site. Only it wasn't a construction accident. The neck injury had been staged. "Blunt trauma to the occipital bone," he told me. "Very specific. Like he was hit from behind while kneeling. Murder." "And the tattoo on his chest?" "Not just prison ink. A symbol used by a now-defunct gang that operated in the early 2000s. A group known for disappearing witnesses. People who talked." I asked Saito if the man had any known family. "Not anymore," he said. "Wife died in 2017. No kids. No siblings. Anyone claimed the body yet?" He looked at me. "No. And no one's going to." That night, I went back into the photography room. Alone. I stood in front of the viewing glass. It was clean now. No smudges. No prints. I turned off the lights and stood still. Waited. Just to see. At 11:12 p.m., I saw it again. Movement. Slow. Deliberate. But this time, it wasn't behind the glass. It was reflected in it. And it was standing right behind me. We only keep unclaimed belongings for 30 days. But when I opened locker number 17 on day 31, the uniform inside was still warm. It's an old policy. Any clothes, wallets, jewelry, or personal effects recovered from a body go into a locked gray cabinet in the back of the morgue. Each bag gets a tag. If someone comes to claim it, they sign the release and walk out with a piece of their grief zipped up in plastic. But if no one comes? 30 days. Then it's transferred or destroyed. I've been working in evidence intake for 3 years. It's a quiet job. Repetitive. You learn to disconnect. You learn to touch things that belong to people who died horribly and not think about what their hands were doing the last time they wore them. But last month, something changed. It started with a homicide victim, male, late 50s, no ID. Brought in by county police. Blunt force trauma. Face barely recognizable. All we got was his clothing, a gray uniform, navy blue collar, patches on both sleeves. Security officer. The logo said. Central Logistics. I remember thinking the shirt felt new. Not a wrinkle on it. The boots were military grade. No scuffs. Clean laces. Almost like they'd just come from the box. I logged everything. Bagged and tagged it under locker number 17. Standard procedure. Over the next month, no one came to claim him. No missing persons matches. No family. No hits on the badge ID, and Central Logistics? Doesn't exist. I checked. No company, no office, no records. Probably a front for something, wouldn't be the first. But I kept that gear in the locker. For 30 days. Like I'm supposed to. Day 31 was a Tuesday. I came in, pulled the records for destruction, and wheeled the cart to the evidence cabinet. The hallway was empty. Always is during that shift. I opened locker number 17. And stopped cold. The uniform bag was zipped, but fogged from the inside. Condensation. The kind you see when something warm is sealed in plastic. I hesitated. Touched the outside of the bag. It was warm. Not room temp. Not ambient. Warm. I blinked, heart thudding a little harder than it should have. Maybe a vent was leaking heat. Maybe it was nothing. I opened the bag. Inside, The uniform was damp. Not soaked, just sweat slicked, like someone had been wearing it in July. But the morgue runs at a strict 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That locker's metal. It should have been cold. And then I smelled it. Deodorant. Faint. Male. Cheap. Like it had just been applied. That's when I heard footsteps. Heavy ones. Down the hallway. Heading toward me. I turned. No one there. The door at the end of the corridor slowly clicked closed, just gently swinging on its hinge. I zipped the bag, stuffed it in the destruction bin, and locked the cabinet. But I couldn't stop thinking about that uniform. How clean it had been. How new. And why it still smelled like someone was using it. I wheeled the destruction bin down the hall myself. Normally, we wait for transport. But I wanted it gone. Something about that uniform made my skin crawl. When I got to the disposal chamber, I paused before opening the lid. Just stood there, one hand on the bin handle, listening. I don't know what for. No noise. No movement. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the cold, white emptiness that fills every corner of this place. I lifted the lid. And I swear, the uniform shifted inside the bag. It could have been gravity. Could have been the plastic relaxing. But it looked like someone adjusting their posture. I shut the lid fast. The next morning, I checked the destruction log. The bag was gone. But the log hadn't been signed. Nobody had taken credit for removing it. And no camera footage showed anyone entering the chamber that night but me. Still, the bin was empty. I tried to forget about it. Tried. Until 2 nights later, when a new intake came through, fresh body, multiple stab wounds found in a loading dock downtown. No wallet, no ID. But I recognized the boots. Military grade. Matte black. Same ones I'd bagged under locker number 17. They were still laced. Still clean. Still warm. I asked the officer who'd brought the body if anything had been recovered from the scene. He shook his head. Just the knife. No tags, no phone, no clue who he was. But weird thing, he had a fresh uniform shirt tucked under his jacket. Navy collar. Like some kind of security guard. I asked to see it. He brought it out, sealed in a clear bag. Central Logistics. Untorn. Untouched. Exactly like the one from locker number 17. Except this one wasn't tagged for intake. It was worn. Actively. Recently. I checked the timestamp on the body's intake log, 2:17 a.m. And then I checked the access log for the evidence cabinet. Someone had opened locker number 17 at 2:06 a.m. But I was the only person on shift. And I hadn't gone near it. I filed a silent report with facilities, just in case it was a prank, or worse, an inside job. No one followed up. No one seemed to care. So I did my own check. I pulled the names of every unclaimed homicide victim in the last 2 years who came in with security gear, uniforms, or anything resembling law enforcement identification. 7 cases. 6 with no family. All had gear tagged under locker number 17. All of it went missing after 30 days. And in 4 of the 7 cases, a nearly identical uniform appeared again, on new victims. Same shirt. Same boots. Same company. Always Central Logistics. I don't know who's doing it. Don't know if it's one person or several. But I know this. Someone is collecting those uniforms. And wearing them. And when they're done, they wind up back here. Clean. Warm. Still watching. I told my supervisor I wanted off evidence intake. Said I needed a change. He didn't argue. People get burned out down here all the time. But some nights I stay late. Just to check. Locker number 17 is always locked. But sometimes when I walk past it, I hear breathing.